So we are live with the Man United podcast for the LFC Forum podcast series, and today we just have Miracles Are Possible. Welcome, Paul. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate. How are you doing?
Quite excellent, actually. Uh, so yesterday's result and performance left a little bit to be desired. So let's get into it. What are your initial thoughts on yesterday's performance and the result that we had against United?
I think my response is pretty much contingent on the context in which the game was played, because I don't have that many qualms about the performance. There are issues that obviously we'll discuss. But a 0-0 draw against Man United is never a disgrace. You know, you have to hand it to them. They are a very good team. They are really well coached. And it's never an embarrassment to come out all square against a team that's as good as that. It's just that at the moment, we can't really take it as that great a result purely because of the other results that we've been having. And it just feels a bit frustrating because it was a fixture that maybe could have come a little bit later. Because right now what we really need is a big performance, you know, get a few goals, keep a clean sheet, get 3 points in the bag and have something to build on. And coming back from an international break as well, you know, a game against Man United was pretty ill-timed, but all the same, I think we really needed a win. While it's certainly not an embarrassment to not beat a team like that, it feels like it's part of the same frustrations that we couldn't find a way through, especially given the way they came to Anfield, more or less offering us a draw, happy to take the draw, and we didn't find ourselves in a particular position to do anything about that. And I feel quite frustrated. I'm not angry, I'm not overly heartbroken about it, but it does feel like a continuation of all of the frustrations that we've been having.
Yeah, if I looked at this performance and I looked at this result in a vacuum, then it's not too big a deal. But it's hard to look at results in a vacuum, especially when our recent run has been 1 win in 8. So
Wow.
given that, it's hard for me to look at yesterday's performance and go, it was a fairly and suggest that it was a decent performance, because I actually didn't think it was that decent. I felt that we could have been better.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, our pattern of play looked very predictable. Again, we didn't really create too much. We created a couple of chances yesterday, but nothing that was of note. I just didn't feel like when your run is 1 win in 8, I can't look at a performance in isolation. I have to look at it in totality with all the other performances and what's led to the situation where we've won only one game in the last 8 that we've played.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, I wouldn't say I'm just completely distraught with the way we played, but at the same time, I am disappointed with the way we played, and I thought we certainly could have played better given the way United came to Anfield with virtually zero attacking intent. So I was disappointed from that point of view. There were certain things that I was pleased about. I thought Joe Gomez had a good game yesterday.
Definitely,
Yeah, he perhaps was probably our best player, I would have said.
Mm-hmm.
Defensively, for the most part, he nullified Anthony Martial for the most part. And Lukaku didn't really have a sniff on goal. I thought Lovren was also quite decent yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
He had a good game. And the midfield they worked hard. I thought Wijnaldum had probably he was definitely the best of the 3 midfielders yesterday.
Sure.
And Salah had some nice moments where he drove well. Again, some of the play that he had, not necessarily in the box, but outside the box, was really good. The way he turned away from players, the way he was able to take the ball, getting the ball out wide and taking it inside was really nice to see. But again, I think he maybe got too much of a. I think he got a little over anxious by taking that ball from Coutinho, when Coutinho probably should have left it for Coutinho to score. But overall, it was okay. I didn't think Firmino had a great game, but we'll get into him a little bit later. I want to touch upon that subject a little bit later.
Sure.
But those are my initial thoughts. And I thought Mignolet had a good save.
Yeah, that was. I mean, the shot was right at him, but he did well to parry it, and he parried it out of danger as well. So, no complaints about Mignolet. Picking up on what you were saying just a moment ago about Salah, I must say he was probably the brightest spark. I know you mentioned Gomez, and you've got to hand it to the lads to perform as well as that against a player like Anthony Martial. You got to applaud that, especially because I see Joe Gomez more naturally as a centre back, and so to adjust to the right back position against a really good player, someone who's a real threat down the left, you got to say he did really well. But I think Salah going forward was our greatest threat, probably the best thing about our team. Certainly the player I enjoyed watching the most. But the issue that I have with Salah right now is that I think he's snatching at his chances a little bit. He turned away from Matic a number of times. I think Matic had been hired to try and do a number on Salah to limit Salah's influence on the team. Salah kept escaping him. And time and again, he also managed to show just how ordinary a defender Matteo Darmian is as well. I was really pleased with how cleverly he uses the ball. I love his movement, but he does really snatch his chances. And that's just one frontier that I think he needs to cross in order to become a real star. Because right now we have a fantastic player. I really, really like Mohamed Salah, but we could have a magnificent one if he just managed to get his foot behind the ball a bit better when he's in front of goal. A little bit more awareness, as you said, of where Coutinho was as well, wouldn't have gone amiss. Because Coutinho was far better placed to actually put that ball in the back of the net. And when Salah did strike it, it wasn't the cleanest. It was, in my opinion, a relatively savable attempt on goal, even though he wasn't the one that should have been hitting it. And then there was the second half when you could tell he was getting a bit frustrated and hit a hopeful long shot straight into the cop, and it felt like he was just losing his way a little bit. He was losing his head. What Salah, I think, needs to do is just get back to basics, not lose sight of what he's there on the field to do, because for the most part, I thought he did really well. Just going forward, I think he needs to get that little bit better at taking his opportunities.
Yeah, certainly. And this sort of leads me into the second part of what I wanted to discuss regarding yesterday's game, the starting lineup. So again, the starting lineup was predictable. I thought the only real place that was under threat was, the only place that was up for contention was the right back position, whether it was going to be Trent or it was going to be Joe. So obviously Gomez got the nod there. Again, I wanted to see Oxlade-Chamberlain get the start. I wanted to see that happen. I didn't want to see the midfield get changed where we put Coutinho up into the front three. I wanted Coutinho to remain in midfield and then play whoever, pick one of the other three to play alongside him. That's what I would have wanted. Obviously, Klopp, maybe he did fear a little bit of the United threat to some degree. Maybe he looked at them and he saw them and said, you know what, we'll be safe in midfield. We'll try and dominate midfield with three fairly similar players in Emre Can, Henderson, and Wijnaldum. And we'll put Ox on the bench again. I get frustrated when I see that for one reason, because here we have a situation with Mane being out, and Oxlade-Chamberlain was, I would say, presumably bought for this kind of situation when we have one of the wide players out. He would become the natural replacement for them. Once again, he doesn't get a start, and that really does frustrate me. Not that I think that he won't get games. I do think he'll get games. I presume he'll start against Maribor. But it's just frustrating to me to see Klopp change the system again or deviate away from things when there is a natural replacement in the team, and he's bought him recently for that kind of money. So what are your thoughts on this Oxlade-Chamberlain situation right now?
I don't think it particularly plays to our strengths, to be honest, to take Coutinho out of the midfield, purely because Mane has picked up an injury. Coutinho in midfield, I think he suits that role down to the ground, and to uproot him from that and place him out wide, it imbalances the team, in my opinion. Coutinho is so much more a kind of number 8 or number 10 kind of maestro who likes to bring other players into the game. That's more his game, to drive forward with the ball, beat a man, drive through the midfield, drive through the central midfield with a ball at feet and keep our play ticking over. That's more of his game. I think Wijnaldum was tasked with fulfilling that role a little bit more yesterday because Coutinho had been moved out left. Though Coutinho actually did tend to drift a bit more centrally and have Moreno providing the width out on the left. And while I think Moreno does provide width, and it is one of his strengths, I don't think that balance was quite right. I think we looked a little bit threadbare out left because we ended up more or less with 4 central midfielders a lot of the time. And a natural buffer against that would have been to start Oxlade-Chamberlain. And that was exactly, as you just said, what I thought. I thought we were bringing him in so that when Mane or Salah went down with an injury, we didn't have to change the balance of our team and that we'd still be able to maintain a fast, pacey, direct attacking threat in the wide positions. So I'm now confused as to what's gone on. It seems Klopp wants to do anything other than play him at the moment. And it's strange to me because I think it was yesterday or the day before the Klopp came out and said that Oxlade-Chamberlain wasn't ready to start for Liverpool and that he needed more time to bed in. That seems strange to me because Oxlade-Chamberlain's been here 6 weeks now. There's probably not an argument that he isn't match fit. And even if he's a bit rusty, even if he needs work to suit the system, to me it seems preferable to bring him into the team, even just so that it gets better results out of Coutinho, even if it just helps to maintain a particular shape. Because I think the only way you're going to get a player like that, and we're going to need to call on him quite a lot over the next 6 weeks when Mane's out, to get the best out of a player like him, he needs game time. There's only so much that I think you can do with him on the training pitch that's going to get him used to the way Klopp wants this team to play. So I really want to see him start to pick up games. As you said, I'm sure he will play against Maribor. I hope he takes that chance with both hands, and I hope he makes something really good out of it. But I really think that he ought to have played, and I can't quite understand what it is that's keeping him from playing, because I'm not 100% that I buy the argument that he isn't ready to play for Liverpool at this stage.
Yeah, I can't see it either because unless it's a fitness issue. But if it's not a fitness issue, the only way he's going to gel with his teammates is going to be by playing actual games against other opponents, not doing it in a training session. So that's number one. Number two, even if Oxlade-Chamberlain isn't completely up to speed with the way Klopp wants to play, or in terms of integration of him, in terms of the tactical side of the game, at worst, Oxlade-Chamberlain, he is a one-on-one player, and he can be a one-on-one player, meaning he can take his fullback on and create something at worst. So it's preferable to have him there than having 3 similar midfielders playing in central midfield and essentially doing the same job. And again, against a team that has come to Anfield with virtually zero intent to attack. And that's something I'm confused on. I'm still wondering why we chose not to do this, why we chose not to play him yesterday. Otherwise, I thought the team selection more or less picked itself. So I'm hoping, again, and I also don't like the idea that he gets the Maribor game to hopefully take his opportunity. Now, he needs a run of games if he's going to get completely embedded in our system. So I hope that he plays against Maribor, and I hope that he also plays next week as well. I don't want to see the situation where he's going in and out, because it's basically confusing the team. Coutinho has to play midfield one game, has to play on the left side another game. It's just upsetting the balance, and I don't particularly think that's conducive for us to start picking up consistency and picking up wins as a result.
One thing that I wonder about with the Oxlade-Chamberlain situation, moving on from that a bit, is I wonder whether it's evidence of things not really right behind the scenes, because the fee that we've paid for the player who had rather, 10 months left on his contract, is completely at odds with the way the manager's been using him. So I really wonder what's going on. Is it that the scouts have said, right, Oxlade-Chamberlain is the player you need, or that someone higher up in the club than Klopp has said, right, we're going to get this lad and we're going to spend 40 million on him, and you can use him how you want, a great player for you. And the manager has said, well, buy him if you want, but I don't think he's necessarily all that useful to me. Or is he, someone that the manager has decided that he is worth 40 million, but just hasn't decided when he's arrived at the club that he's worth giving game time to? I can't figure out what the situation on this is, but it seems a bit odd to me, to be honest. It seems really odd.
It's almost I don't want to suggest that it is, but if you're looking at a similar situation, you could look at someone like Markovic, who presumably wasn't a player that Brendan had earmarked. He was bought by the other folks in the transfer committee, presumably because he was a young, but at least according to them, a blossoming youngster.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's a hefty fee that we paid for him, and it also came at the time when we were linked with Thomas Lamar quite feverishly at that end of the transfer window. So I do wonder what's going on here in terms of the behind the scenes. Maybe there is some discord behind the scenes. You never know, but I'm assuming to take Klopp at his word, suggesting that he has final say, and somehow he's just not figured out how to use Oxlade-Chamberlain at this point.
Fair enough.
But in addition to Oxlade-Chamberlain, in keeping in that vein, I also want to talk a little bit about substitutions and the pattern of substitutions yesterday. When it was around the 68th minute mark, I was frequenting the match thread, and I'd said, I think we need a change. And then progressively from the 60th minute mark to the time we actually made the change, which was around the 77th minute, I was imploring that we need to make changes. And a couple of changes that I suggested were Solanke or Sturridge and Oxlade-Chamberlain. I hoped that they would come on for Firmino and for maybe someone in midfield, possibly Emery.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was hoping for. Obviously, it didn't happen. It happened for Coutinho and Salah, two of our better players, at least attacking-wise. And now some posters have brought it up that it looked like Coutinho was limping. I'm not sure about that. And the other was that both of them had traveled quite a lot of distance and had only arrived back pretty late in the week. So that's the reason why they were removed at the 77-minute mark. Maybe that's what the doctors and the physios had said would be the appropriate time they should play, about 75 or 80 minutes or so. So I do, again, it comes back to Klopp's substitutions and the fact that he is extremely late at times with substituting. I'm not suggesting that the physios or the medical team are wrong when they're coming up with their suggestions for how long someone should play. But I do want to see Klopp make substitutions earlier. He doesn't have to take off Coutinho at the 16-minute mark. Yeah. He can take him off later, when he can make a couple of substitutions. Take off Emre, take off Firmino, put on Solanke, Sturridge, and then maybe Ox for those players. And then perhaps we get a goal.
Yeah.
Perhaps we get 2 goals. And then you still have one substitution in your back pocket to make that change later on, to bring on a Milner, for example, for Coutinho, if you've given him an allocated time. But this idea that he's going to give Coutinho the entire 75 and then substitute him, it almost seems very preseason-ish to me, that he's going by the allocated time rather than looking at the game and seeing from the game what we need. And managers are paid to balance that out between managing a player's health and at the same time managing the team to actually get a result. So what are your thoughts on this? Because it really annoyed me yesterday in the game.
If Coutinho was limping, I didn't notice it. I mean, I might well be wrong, and I might need to go back and have a look at it, but I didn't notice any tiredness in him. And one thing that what you said before reminded me of is that before the League Cup final last year, when a reporter asked Jurgen Klopp in a press conference whether he thought it was an advantage that Man City had an away trip in Europe, in Eastern Europe, a couple of days before the final, his response was, well, they're flying back, they're not walking. So I don't think even Jurgen Klopp buys the idea that it was because they had to fly quite a distance. To be honest, I think that a slightly jaded Philippe Coutinho is still a world-class player who can turn a game on its head in an instant. He's the kind of player that can produce sheer brilliance without having to think too much about it. It's his game. He produces these incredible moments. And honestly, I'd rather see a slightly tired Philippe Coutinho on the field than a fully fit Emre Can. Because even when he's not quite at 100%, even if he's only at 75%, he's still one of our best goal threats. Same with Salah. I was very disappointed to see Salah come off. I thought he'd given Matteo Darmian the worst afternoon. It was a really, really bad day for the Man United left back. Matic, who's a great player, didn't really seem to have much joy against him either. And most of our attacking threat went off the field, in my opinion, when Philippe Coutinho and Mohamed Salah were taken off. But even if there are strong arguments, and there might be strong arguments in favour of taking those players off, I think the formation, the shape that we adopted when those players did go off, didn't fill me with confidence that we were going to go on and get the winner. We ended up at one point with Firmino out on the left, which I don't think is his game. Sturridge in the central striker's position, which in fairness is his game, and Oxlade-Chamberlain on the right. And okay, you got two out of the three players in their rightful position, but because Firmino is a bit of an outlier on the left-hand side and it doesn't really suit him, I don't really think that the balance of the front three is correct at that stage. And then when you take Firmino off for Solanke, and then you've got Solanke up front, and then Sturridge playing off him slightly further towards the left, the attack doesn't fill me with anywhere near as much confidence as it would have done if Coutinho and Salah had just stayed on. So I don't think it's just a case of how long we took to make the substitutions. Yeah, that does frustrate me. I did want to see changes made around the hour mark. I think our attack was in the process of going a little bit stale. But I think we've also got to make the right substitutions. And sometimes I feel like the substitutions that we do make don't maximize our chances of getting the result that we're after. Sometimes they feel like they're being done almost to see what works, just to see what sticks. And unfortunately, it didn't yesterday. We'll never know what could have happened if Coutinho or Salah had stayed on, or if we'd played a slightly different shape after those players went off. But genuinely believe that we didn't do our chances of winning the match a great deal of good in the substitutions that we did go on to make.
Yeah, I actually talked about this in the post-match thread with a couple of posters regarding the substitutions. Again, the idea was that they were obviously jaded. They needed to come off. They looked pretty tired, and I can understand that. My issue became basically the manager has to balance both aspects of within that encompass the entire game. He has to manage their fitness, obviously, make sure they don't get injured, because that's the last thing that we want. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if you make substitutions a little bit earlier, and you keep another substitution with you, you have the option of making that substitution on later on. So if Coutinho has been given and told by the medical staff, told Klopp and has been told by the medical staff, you can play about 80 minutes or so. Klopp can make that change. He has that ability to do that. But
that's true.
To look at the game and then just let our attack meander, basically, because it looked pretty hopeless after a certain point. It didn't really look like it was cohesive. Players looked like they needed new ideas, a fresh spark, and Oxlade-Chamberlain looked quite decent when he came on. He had some decent runs down the right side. We could have used him earlier, at least had pace on both wings, Salah on one, Oxlade-Chamberlain on the other, and had Sturridge in his normal role with Firmino being withdrawn. I just feel that his substitutions have really not worked out at all this season. I get back to the first game. Was it against Watford?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he made the substitution for Trent, and he brought on Joe Gomez, who conceded the free kick.
Yeah.
So his substitutions barely have worked at all in a positive way. So I think his in-game management is just not particularly good. He doesn't seem to make particularly great substitutions, at least not this season. So I just find that something that he needs to work on, or something that he needs to, again, he just needs to be more proactive as a manager. He's reactive as opposed to proactive. And yesterday's substitution just stank of preseason type of substitution. I'm going to give them 80 minutes, and that's what I'm going to give them. And then I'll substitute. Rather than looking at the game and seeing that the attack was slowing down, it was coming to a crawl, make those changes, be proactive, and go for the win and get the goals. And if you get the goals, then you can pull one of your star players off.
One aspect of the substitutions that does frustrate me is that often when we're making substitutions when we're in a good position. So we were 3-2 up at Vicarage Road. We were 2-1 up against Bournemouth at Anfield last season. On both occasions, what we did was bring off a player from the midfield or the forward line for a defender, thereby inviting pressure onto a defence that isn't really up to it. And that, I think, is something that needs to change in terms of the way that we manage games. Because I would so much rather see us maintain our proactive approach across 90 minutes and not feel like teams like Watford and teams like Bournemouth are the kind of sides that we need to get 10 men behind the ball against, and teams that we're happy to just sit back and let them try to attack us. We should, against teams like that, maintain our initiative from the first whistle to the last. And sometimes the way we make substitutions really robs us of the ability to take that approach. And that's something that I want to see improved on as time goes on.
Yeah, I hope that going forward, his in-game management improves. And one more thing I want to touch on with regard to yesterday, and it's a topic of discussion again on the boards today. It's the idea of playing without a notable striker. So once again, Firmino has not scored today in yesterday's game. So is it time for a change? Is it time to basically scrap the 4-3-3 right now, go back to 4-2-3-1, and play a notable striker, whether that be Solanke, whether that be Sturridge, but playing someone who is going to actually lead the line, and not necessarily play the 4-3-3, because I feel the responsibilities for a striker in the 4-3-3 that Klopp wants to employ almost robs them of being an out-and-out striker.
Yeah.
Sturridge has to do a lot of other peripheral things to basically integrate the likes of Salah and whoever the other wide man is, so that everyone's kind of coming together and playing together, as opposed to if we played 4-2-3-1, the number 10 would be the one who's doing that. Yeah. And Coutinho as a number 8 would also help with that. And Sturridge could do what Sturridge does best, which is play on the shoulder and not have to do all these other things. And the same thing with Solanke. Again, when I see Solanke play, I like what he does. I think he's a very decent young player, but a lot of the good things that he's doing are things like getting involved in the integration of play, not necessarily being in the box, not necessarily playing on the shoulder. That's what I want to see. And I look at players who, I was looking the other day at a Torres video, Fernando Torres video, when in his time with us. The amount of times that he is not involved in the actual buildup of play is just remarkable. He's literally just on the shoulder of the last defender, looking to make runs all the time. And I feel that right now, given the way we're playing, we need a little bit of a change in formation. We need a change in system. We need a change in identity at this point. And having a player like Sturridge, who's a terrifically good player, I think he's lost some pace, but I still think he's not completely out of pace. So having him play on the shoulder, not integrating play, and having a proper number 10 like Firmino is, and playing him in his best position as well, would do wonders for this team, especially and get us out of this awful 1-8 run at this point. So I do think it's time to play with a out-and-out striker. What are your thoughts on this?
So I was looking into some of Firmino's stats this morning, and one stat that's become really fashionable this season, you now see it on Match of the Day, is that of expected goals. It's based on an algorithm of, how difficult are a player's chances, how likely is he to score, does he get into the right positions, and so on. And there's a way of kind of marking out how many goals you would expect a player to score in his current role, playing for his current team, the way that he's playing. Now, I had a look into what Firmino's were, and according to understat.com, which is one of the main kind of proponents of expected goals right now, Firmino's expected to score about 9 more league goals this season. I compared that to Gabriel Jesus, who knocked a couple past us, and he's actually expected to score about 3 times that if he plays 90 minutes every game, which he won't. But either way, it reflects what we all, whether or not you believe in the whole expected goals thing, I find it interesting. Others don't have to. It does reflect what a lot of us have been saying about him, that he's just not actually that clinical. And I almost feel like he's often instructed to drop that little bit deeper because that is his kind of play.
Yeah.
And when he plays as sort of a false 9, which is very often, he does look really good because he's very good at dropping 10 yards deeper. He's very good at picking out an intelligent pass that others wouldn't have spotted. He's very good at keeping hold of the ball and making things work. It's something that he's got in his locker. What he doesn't really have in his locker is consistent clinical finishing. What we need to do, and I've been saying this from day one, even in the aftermath of the Arsenal game where he was really outstanding, we still need to actually put him in a role where he's a number 10, because that's his game. I think he's a brilliant number 10. He's an okay striker, but he's a fantastic number 10. And when he's played as a striker for Liverpool, his most outstanding performances have been when he plays as deep as a number 10 otherwise would play. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't now look to change up our attack and say, okay, Firmino isn't working for us as a centre forward because it's not his game. What is his game? The game that he's outstanding at is playing off a striker between 2 wide players in an attacking line that would have more options than we currently have. I would so much rather see Firmino, Salah, Mane when he's fit, and Sturridge in a front 4 playing off each other, because they're all incredibly intelligent players, all top class in their individual roles. If you have a 4-2-3-1, you give that front 4 the freedom to roam that's provided with having 2 midfielders to drop in deep behind them and a back 4. I would love to see what we could achieve if we give creative freedom to Sturridge, Salah, Mane, and Firmino. As I said, I think that in their own way, absolutely brilliant football players, and I think they'd thrive on that freedom. I don't think that at the moment the 4-3-3 is providing us with the options that we need in the final third. You do see moments of individual brilliance. Salah, I thought, was, apart from his finishing, really very good yesterday. But what could help players like Salah to get better results out of themselves, to bring better performances out of themselves, is to have more players near them off the ball, because what's so good about the players that we do have in attack is their interplay, the way they can spot a pass. You know, they're very bright. They're extremely intelligent players with great vision. And to give them the opportunity to play off each other would bring out the best from our attack.
Yeah, I completely agree. And also, one of the things we've always bemoaned about our play is sometimes the lack of bodies that are present in the box. And that often happens when we have a player who's playing a false nine role, who's constantly coming deeper. Firmino's whole entire game when he's playing the false nine is to come deeper. And he's not actually playing as a center. He's not actually playing as a striker should play, which is at least what we want a striker to play, which is his first and foremost objective is to get goals. Whereas with Firmino, his first and foremost objective is to integrate everybody into play, which is why players like Mane and Salah are actually getting more goals than he is for the most part, and will probably get more goals than he will this season, because his role is almost to help them play better. And I don't see why that needs. I mean, I understand that why that's part of his game, and that's a more natural aspect of his game. But you can have that, and you can have a lot more if you tweak the formation, whereby you would actually have an out-and-out striker in Sturridge. And this is going also back to Sturridge. I actually don't feel like Sturridge has been at his best under Jurgen Klopp. Number one, it's his fitness. Obviously, you know, he's had a terrible time with injuries. But at the same time, I don't think 4-3-3 suits him at all, because we see Sturridge as well having to come deeper a lot of the time, get on the ball, and constantly playing with his back to goal. And as a striker, I don't want to see you constantly playing with your back to goal. I want to see you being more adventurous, making more runs, and constantly we see a lot of our play die because we don't have players making runs. We don't have players who are stretching the back line. That's why everything goes to the wings. Our fullbacks see a lot more of the ball, and we're just used to just crossing it in there. And we're not a good team we're not a team that really thrives on wide play and headers. It's just one of those things. We don't thrive on that. It's not our game. So we need to tweak this system, and I hope. I have no expectation that it will be tweaked. I think Klopp really values the midfield three that he has currently. I think he values the likes of Lallana. Lallana, if he were fit, to some degree, maybe it makes the 4-3-3 better, because you can say that Lallana is as valuable at this time as Sturridge is, just given on the fact of fitness issues and the fact that Sturridge has really not hit the heights under Klopp, and Lallana really has played well under Klopp. So you could say that, okay, you know, there's an opportunity cost there. But right now, I don't see there being any real opportunity cost, because I know Fergs has always been a proponent of, having a midfield three that will protect the back four. But considering how shit we are, regardless. With three midfielders protecting that back four, and it doesn't help at all. It really doesn't. We're worse off this season defensively than we were last season. I just don't understand why we would persist with a formation that actually, to some degree, handicaps us, especially when it leaves one of your better players on the bench, when that player could be starting, and we could be winning more games.
Yeah, and one of the issues I have, especially with the 4-3-3 that we play, is that it relies on a false nine. And that's the kind of system that you'd only ever play if the player that you had in that position was someone like Messi, which is why it worked so well at Barcelona. The reason that Messi played as a false nine under Guardiola so successfully was because of the fact that he is the kind of player that defenders are going to want to man mark out of the game. So defenders are going to follow him when he drops that little bit deeper, and that opens up space. That's what makes a false nine system tick. Man United were never going to drop their ranks and follow Firmino out into the midfield, because they don't and had no reason to fear the space that he could have taken advantage of in behind them, because in front of goal, he's not Messi. He's not a world-class 30-goal a season striker. And so they were perfectly happy to let Firmino drop deep. No one was going to follow him. They'd set up to defend very solidly. And you've got to say they did that pretty well. So to persist with that against teams that actually aren't really going to be broken down by errors in man marking seems like an error to me. What you can do instead is put Sturridge on the field, let Firmino stay deep, and then that defence, who wouldn't normally be dragged out of position, have something else to think about. Because they don't just have to think about where Firmino is. All of a sudden, they've got to align themselves in relation to how Firmino is playing off Daniel Sturridge as well. Which, if we played that yesterday, would have provided so many different problems to Man United than the ones we caused them. Because while I think we could and possibly should have scored a couple of goals, that doesn't make our attacking play unimpeachable. There were difficulties in it. And one of the issues that we had in our attack was that we didn't really give Man United that much reason to break their organisation. That's something that the 4-2-3-1 could really provide us with going forward.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I think that some other posters have also questioned the wisdom of the 4-3-3 being employed so often. Almost, it's been ubiquitous for the last 2 seasons now. Lastly, again, we have a really important game now coming up on Tuesday against Maribor.
Mm-hmm.
I am a little bit worried because we're going to be it's going to be halfway through the Champions League group stage now, and we've not yet picked up our first win.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little bit concerning to me. Again, I totally get where people are coming from in that, yes, we still have ample opportunity to qualify for the next round of the Champions League. And that's well and good. But at this point, I am a little bit nervous. And certainly not picking up a win against Maribor would really put the pressure on this team, even though they can qualify, even though they will have an opportunity to qualify because they'll play Spartak and they'll play Maribor at home.
Sure.
It's just, when you look at this champion, to basically look at this point and go, we've not yet picked up a win in a group that's relatively favorable, because we could have picked up a much worse group than the group that we've picked and that we've gotten picked to. It's a little bit disheartening at this point that we have looked so toothless. Not necessarily as poor as we looked in 2014, but again, it's not the best way to go, and we're missing Sadio, and teams are picking up on the fact that it's not hard to stop this Liverpool attack. It can be done. It's been done quite well in the last 8 games. So, do you have any concerns before this Maribor game? What are you thinking about before this game?
First of all, I think it's disappointing to go into a game against a relative minnow in the Champions League feeling like it's must win. We should probably have picked up more points. I think it would have been fair to say that we should have 6 points by now. 4 probably would have been fair as well. But this game's become bigger than I think it needed to be. That said, it's not in my head to fail to beat Maribor. I'm not, without wanting to be arrogant, I can't see how we could mess that up. They will likely defend. There will be challenges. That a point at home to Liverpool would probably be a fantastic result for them. And make no mistake, we're going to have to play well to beat them. We'll be doing our chances the world of good if we get the balance of the attack right. It isn't in my head to not beat them, but I want to see a good performance. I want to see a nice attacking style that bodes well for Spurs. I want to see us get a few goals as well, get our goal difference up. Hopefully Spartak can do us a favour against Sevilla as well. but it's, I must say, a game that's come at quite a good time, because that's a game that Liverpool not only must win, but you can't see them not winning it either. And hopefully we can use that as the catalyst to, it feels disappointing to have to use the phrase kickstart a season in the middle of October, but kickstart our season. That's what it could do. Get some confidence under our belts and see where it takes us.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So we'll pick this up probably after the Maribor game.
Sounds good.
We'll go from there. Thanks for your time, Paul. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Take care.
Take care.